New York has always been built on ambition, steel, sweat, and the dreams of millions who arrived with nothing but hope. But in the early 1900s, the cost of that ambition was hidden in the shadows of sweatshops. The most infamous of these sat just off Washington Square Park, inside a building that, from the outside, looked ordinary. But what happened there in March 1911 would go down as one of the darkest moments in New York history. They called it a fire. Survivors called it murder by neglect. It was a massacre of workers, most of them young immigrant women, and it sparked a labor war that would forever change the city. The building was the Ash Building, an imposing 10-story structure of brick and steel at Green Street and Washington Place. On the top 3 floors, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory operated in constant motion. Hundreds of workers, mostly Jewish and Italian immigrant girls, some as young as 14, bent over sewing machines from morning until night, producing the fashionable blouses that gave the factory its name. Wages were pitiful, hours were brutal, and safety? That was almost non-existent. Doors were locked to prevent theft and unauthorized breaks. Fire drills didn't exist. Exits were narrow and blocked. The owners, Isaac Harris and Max Blank, were more concerned with profit than protection. Still, for many of the women who worked there, the factory meant survival. They came from tenement apartments in the Lower East Side, from families barely scraping by. Their pay, a few dollars a week, kept food on the table. Every day they crowded into the lofts, rows of machines clattering, air thick with fabric dust. It was hot, cramped, dangerous, but no one expected what would happen on March 25, 1911. That Saturday afternoon, just before quitting time, a fire broke out on the 8th floor. It started small in a scrap bin overflowing with fabric cuttings, but within moments, flames roared upward, fueled by cloth, wood tables, and paper patterns that covered the factory. Workers panicked. Some ran for the exits, only to find doors locked. Others tried the elevators, but they quickly broke down under the crush. The stairwells filled with smoke. Within minutes, the fire became an inferno. On the 9th floor, hundreds were trapped. Flames blocked one exit and locked doors sealed off another. Desperate workers rushed to the windows. Some found fire escapes, but those narrow iron ladders weren't built for the weight. They twisted, buckled, and collapsed under the bodies. Others jumped from the 9th floor, from the 8th floor, crashing onto the sidewalks below. Crowds gathered outside, horrified, as girls leapt to their deaths rather than burn alive. Firefighters arrived, but their ladders only reached the 6th floor. Their nets tore under the force of falling bodies. In less than half an hour, the fire claimed 146 lives. The aftermath was unbearable. Families filled the streets, searching for loved ones. Morgues were overwhelmed. Entire communities in the Lower East Side sat in mourning. Many of the victims were teenagers, their names later etched into history. The city was in shock, but also in rage. How could this have been allowed to happen? Why were doors locked? Why were fire escapes useless? Why had the city looked away while thousands of immigrants labored in death traps across Manhattan? The owners, Harris and Blank, were put on trial. Prosecutors charged them with manslaughter, pointing to the locked doors as direct evidence of negligence. Survivors testified, describing how they found exits chained, how they begged to escape but were blocked. But the defense argued that the fire was a tragic accident, not a crime. In the end, the jury acquitted the owners. Later, they paid small settlements in civil suits, about $75 for each life lost. For many, that was the final insult. Lives reduced to dollars, justice denied. But if the courtroom failed, the streets did not. Tens of thousands of people marched in silent funerals, carrying banners with the names of the dead. Labor unions, especially the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, seized the moment. They had fought for years to unionize garment shops, to demand shorter hours, safer conditions, fair pay. Before the fire, they were dismissed as radicals. After the fire, they became the voice of conscience. Politicians who had ignored them now scrambled to respond. The tragedy became the turning point for labor reform. New York State created new commissions to investigate factory conditions. They passed laws requiring fire drills, sprinklers, unlocked exits, and building codes that valued safety over profit. Hours were limited, inspections increased, and workers gained rights that had once seemed impossible. For the labor movement, the Triangle Fire was both the deepest scar and the strongest weapon. The memory of those 146 workers fueled strikes, marches, and a push for reforms that spread far beyond New York. Yet, for the families of the victims, the pain never faded. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, immigrants who had crossed oceans for a better life, only to die in locked rooms above the city streets. Their funerals were quiet revolutions. Their names became symbols. They weren't politicians or leaders, but their deaths forced change that leaders had resisted for decades. Today, the Ash Building still stands. It's now known as the Brown Building, part of New York University. Students walk its halls, unaware that beneath the floors lies a history written in smoke and blood. A small plaque honors the victims, but the silence of the walls carries the real memory. This wasn't just a fire. It was a massacre by neglect, a tragedy born from greed, disregard, and a system that treated workers as disposable. The forgotten massacre that sparked a labor war wasn't fought with guns or soldiers. It was fought with flames, with locked doors, with the bodies of young women who never made it home. And from that sacrifice came laws, unions, protections, imperfect but vital. Every workplace safety code, every unlocked exit sign, every sprinkler system carries the legacy of that day. So when you walk past Washington Square, look up at that building. Remember the girls who leapt from its windows, the families who buried them, the crowds that demanded change. Remember that the New York we know was built not just on ambition, but on ashes. The labor war began in tragedy, but it ended with a city forced to listen.